Awesome. You guys just know when someone says this guy's a lobbyist, you pour forth like, oh! They made me be a lobbyist because in the midst of trying to campaign for the bill, I bought some legislators lunch, and apparently that's illegal, and so I had to sign up and all this kind of stuff. So I'm with an organization called Free the States, yada yada. But this is super awesome that we're here in a church together as believers and in the name of Jesus Christ trying to abolish abortion. Amen, it's awesome. My job, and I'm going to attempt to do this in 30 minutes, my job is to actually sort of demarcate, right? This is kind of a fancy word, right? Demarcate the differences between a pro-life bill and an abolition bill. So I call it an abolition bill. The bill that y'all have, the abortion, I don't even know what, the Abortion Human Rights Act. Y'all need a different lobbyist, that name. But anyway, that's an abolitionist bill. Okay, so what distinguishes it from some other bill that's traditionally known as a pro-life bill? Now, you may not even use the word abolition. It may be sort of a foreign concept. You see it on the shirts and stuff. But the point isn't to get hung up on that word, but the point is to sort of understand what it is that we're saying is biblical, just, and we ought to do as Christians, and what we believe we should stop doing that we've been doing for 45 years. So I got a lot of slides. I'm going to jump right into it, okay? Pro-life and abolition. An abolitionist bill, quite simple, right? What does it do? What is it seeking to do? It's seeking to totally and immediately abolish abortion as murder. Well, that's what it seeks to do, but we're going to talk about how, and how that's different from a traditional pro-life bill. So total and immediate, pretty important phrase. Abolition, very important legal phrase. And abortion as murder. The most important word in that phrase there is as. So what do we mean by total and immediate abolition? So total, no exceptions. If we're going to abolish abortion, we're going to do it without exceptions. We're not going to say you can't abort a baby unless the baby's conceived in rape. You can't abort a baby unless the baby is this or that, in the case of this exception or that exception. An abolitionist bill is saying, no, we're not going to make exceptions. We're not going to try to abolish abortion by allowing abortion. And by immediate, it just means not incrementally. So a lot of pro-life bills, instead of trying to end abortion as abortion in and of itself, they'll focus on this kind of abortion or that kind of abortion and incrementally chip away at abortion over time. The helpful analogy that a lot of abolitionists use is that of a tree. You take a tree, the tree is abortion, and there's all these different ways of abortion. You have chemical abortions, you have surgical abortions. In the chemical abortions, you've got your abortifacient drugs and devices, you've got your RU-486s, so on and so forth. There's various ways of murdering an image bearer in the womb using chemicals. Don't require surgical implements. But a lot of abortions happen this way. You can have RU-486 murdering a child at 5 weeks or up to 14 weeks even. So you got chemical abortions, then you also have surgical abortions. You have abortion by dismemberment. You can do an abortion with curettage abortion. You can do an abortion with suction devices, suction abortions, and you can do abortions with forceps, ripping the baby apart. These are all different abortions. And then there's late-term abortions, where basically you're delivering the baby and killing them at the same time, or various ways. As wicked people in rebellion to God, we've come up with all sorts of ways of killing preborn human beings. But the important thing for those of us who believe that all human beings are made in the image of God from the moment of conception is that we understand rightly that all of these different methods are all the same thing. They're all murder. That there really is no difference between murdering a child with chemicals or murdering a child with forceps. So to demarcate what a pro-lifer is generally doing, when they look at this tree, they come in and they look for a branch. Late-term abortion ban, dismemberment abortion ban, abortion at this period, at that period. The abolitionist says, let's go for the trunk. Pretty easy. Let's chop it all down. We're trying to abolish abortion, not a kind of abortion. So that's what we mean by total and immediate. No exceptions, the whole thing, not incrementally. Okay, so abolition. Why use this word? It's associated with slavery or Christ abolishing death or something like that. Why use this sort of 19th century word? Well, it's just a word. It's a noun, formal act of putting an end to, annulling. It's a very good, strong word. If you're for the abolition of something and someone opposes you, they're an anti-abolitionist, and no one wants to be an anti-abolitionist, except for some people still in the South. But we're abolitionists. It just means that we're for the formal end to an abortion. We want to prohibit abortion. Okay? Very simple. We want to prohibit it. We want it to be an impossible thing that you have done under the covering of law. So by prohibiting abortion, it's explicit. So an abolition bill is explicitly prohibiting abortion in and of itself, not regulating it. So that means criminalization. So an abolition bill, unlike some other bills that are sort of messing around with abortion, is specifically saying this act of murdering a child in the womb is a criminal act that will be prohibited by law. We'll get more into that, but let's move on to abortion as murder. So abortion as murder, some people say you don't need to pass. One of the critics of SB 13 said we don't need to pass a law against abortion. It's already illegal. It's like, well, then why is it going on and all this good stuff? And I think that the first speaker, Scott, explained all that and what's going on in our country. But essentially, if you want to think about what an abolitionist bill is doing, it's trying to apply the laws against murder equally to all humans. So the kind of law against murdering a born person would be applied equally, and applying it equally across the board. So that is, if we're going to protect people, that's going to require that we prohibit their murder, and if we're going to prohibit their murder, it's going to require that we enact justice, and justice is going to require criminalization. It makes absolutely no sense to say, you're not allowed to abort your baby, but if you do it, we're not going to punish you for it. That's not prohibited. People are like, oh, thanks, and they go do it anyway. There's got to be justice. There's got to be something that occurs. You cannot abolish abortion without treating it as murder, and you are not treating it as murder unless you are criminalizing it. So an abolitionist bill specifically, explicitly seeks equal justice under the law. All pretty simple. You follow with me? Equal justice under the law requires criminalization. If we're going to treat it totally and immediately, also requires criminalization. No. So far, all of this is what an abolitionist bill seeks to do in its language. This is what the abortion, human rights, I can't even remember it. The abolitionist bill y'all have in Idaho, this is what it does. It tries to abolish it. Now, what's going on here is an explicit challenge to the essential holding in Roe v. Wade. Scott talked a little bit about it, but essentially in Roe v. Wade, you have abortion granted as a positive right to mothers. Mothers have the positive right to terminate a pregnancy. Translation, mothers have the right to murder their offspring in the womb. States have the right to regulate that practice after a certain period, but they cannot stop her from murdering her child. So that's the essential holding in Roe v. Wade, that abortion is not criminal, right? Roe v. Wade decriminalized abortion. And it wasn't actually criminalized enough before Roe v. Wade, but that is what it did. That's the essential holding. So, the Supreme Court ruling, according to an abolitionist bill, is flat out wrong, right? The Supreme Court's dead wrong. We don't say, the Supreme Court has said this, as abolitionists, we're going to try to find a loophole and get around this. No, we say, the Supreme Court just was wrong. They were dead wrong. Mothers do not have the right to murder their children. This is not a positive right that should have been granted them and called constitutional and practiced under the covering of our law. They're dead wrong. So when you look at it, Roe, the reason it's wrong isn't because it's unconstitutional necessarily. It's wrong because it's wrong. Why? Because murder is wrong, and we all know it. So Roe being unjust, here's the situation that abolitionists are in as we write these bills and we lobby for these bills. Everyone wants to say, well, it may be unjust, and you may think it's wrong, but it's constitutional. So what we're trying to say is that it's both unjust and unconstitutional because we're Americans, and the Constitution is the foundational document for our laws, right? Apparently. So, but I want to say this and make this clear, that if the Constitution actually did include mothers have the right to murder their children, you know what we would do? We would say to hell with the Constitution, right? We'd have to amend the Constitution. The Constitution would be wrong. The earlier abolitionists who were fighting chattel slavery had a problem. The Constitution actually covered slavery, so they had to amend that. abolitionists were burning the constitutions in their public squares. But we don't have to. We don't have to, because in this case, as Scott's already shown, it's not constitutional. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says you have the right to murder preborn human beings. You just can't find it in there. The Supreme Court invented it, as other people are going to explain further. So it's not in the Constitution. So we've got the situation, Roe is unjust, Roe is unconstitutional. An abolitionist says, okay, so what do we do? What are our political tools that we have? You see these abolitionists running around, I don't see anyone with a shirt. Ignore Roe, just ignore it. Do they have a military? What's the Supreme Court going to do? These are like some old crotchety people wearing dresses, for crying out loud. Just ignore them. They're dead wrong, okay? They're wrong. They're a bunch of professional lawyers who've been appointed to their positions, and we should ignore them. The states should ignore them. So abolitionist bills generally include this language. Now, you think, well, you can't do that. Well, we actually can. Courts don't make laws, as Scott pointed out. Courts do issue opinions about the law, but whenever they issue opinions that are unjust and unconstitutional, they should be ignored. So after all, the state legislature, the state governor, everyone in law enforcement at all the levels took an oath to uphold and defend the opinions of the Supreme Court. No. They took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Well, what happens when the Supreme Court says that you're allowed to do something that's unconstitutional and unjust? You ignore them. You defy them, actually, which we'll get to. So the oath is not to the courts, it is to the Constitution. So what recourse do we have? Well, in the United States of America, this has never really been done successfully, but we've tried it in various ways. The abolitionists certainly were very active as nullifiers when they were breaking the federal slave acts and the Supreme Court decision saying that you could not help slaves run to freedom. And other people have tried nullification, as we've looked at. But an abolitionist bill is making no bones about it. We're not trying to work within the Supreme Court's rulings. We're actually nullifying them. We're saying that no, actually, you're wrong. You need to change your decisions. And until you change your decisions, we are going to protect human beings from murder. And you guys can send your army if you want. So again, this is an abolitionist bill. We haven't even drawn the distinction with a pro-life bill, which we'll get to. And hopefully you guys aren't thinking, oh, that's just a pro-life bill. So, uphold and defend the Constitution, not the courts. What is the 10th Amendment of the Constitution? You guys got that memorized? Nullification, right? The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Abolition is constitutional. Seeking to abolish abortion in your state is constitutional. Now, this is a long quote. It's a juicy quote. I kind of thought you might have actually used it here. But I love Jefferson. I don't love everything about Jefferson. Okay? Okay. But I do love a lot of things that Jefferson said. And he was so blunt sometimes with every state has a natural right to nullify. You can actually find that in all the founding fathers, really. But Thomas Jefferson talked about our situation. In a letter to one of his brothers, he said, "You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions." Let's just pretend he's writing this to us. This is a very dangerous doctrine, indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy. Behold your God, the Constitution, as Scott pointed out. Our judges are as honest as other men, and not more so. They have with others the same passions for party, for power, and the privilege of their core. Their power is the more dangerous as they are in office for life and not responsible as the other functionaries are to the elective control, to being sort of booted out of office, which of course they can be done by Congress, but Jefferson's not covering everything. But the Constitution has erected no such single tribunal, knowing that to whatever hands confided with the corruptions of time and party, its members would become despots, tyrants. So Thomas Jefferson says it has more wisely made all the departments co-equal and co-sovereign within themselves, right? That's not what we have here. We have the entire country and the executive and the legislative branch basically saying, we can't do this because we don't have permission from the Supreme Court. Well, nullification and state sovereignty say that is exactly what we ought to do when the Supreme Court is wrong. Now, here's the founding, and Dan Fisher's in the room, so I credit Dan Fisher with a lot of this. This is the birthright. What do you call it? This is the Declaration of Independence is our country's birth certificate. Beautiful. Of course, I love the document. We all know a lot about the document, but let me just zoom in here a little bit. One thing I really love as someone who makes propaganda is the way that states is really big and United is really small, right? Because they're all about the states, right? Now everyone knows in the Declaration of Independence this very famous line, change the world, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Great, beautiful line. But the Constitution also says, or the Declaration also says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, destructive of the right to life, liberty, and happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Like the Declaration of Independence, it is an abolitionist document, right? So it's saying that when in the course of time your government becomes despotic, tyrannical, and evil, you throw it off, right? Wonderful. Our country's birth certificate is a state sovereignty nullification defy tyrants document. That's what it is. The Constitution allows it. We've got these tools. Why doesn't anyone do it? Okay, so you can't just talk about this. So an abolitionist bill, in the end, is standing up as a state and saying, we are going to interpose on behalf of the preborn human beings in our jurisdiction, and we are going to stand between their mothers, their fathers, those who want to kill them, with our laws, and the federal government, with its tyrannical court opinions, interpose and protect them. And that is how we're going to abolish abortion. That is what an abolitionist law does. Simple, right? Pretty straightforward, pretty elegant. That is not what a pro-life bill does. Are you guys excited about all those lines and squares? Yeah, lots of lines and squares. So what we'll do is to look at the pro-life bill, and I don't know what I'm doing on time, but I'm speaking very quickly to you. What does it seek to do? And let me just say this. Pro-lifers who write these bills, they're not all bad, ignorant people. They're just writing the bills that have been written, and they have a good motive and a good desire to do something. They're trying to save babies and women from abortion, and they're trying to reduce abortion numbers. This is essentially what a good pro-life bill, standard pro-life bill does. You know, like, what's wrong with saving babies and women from abortion? What's wrong with cutting down the number of murders? Okay, so we got saving babies and women from abortion, not abortion as murder, and we have reducing abortion numbers. So let's look at save babies. Oh, very important. You'll notice that the abolitionist bill is just like focused on prohibiting abortion as murder. The pro-life bill is more complex. It's basically there are two victims of abortion that we have to deal with, and we have to write laws to protect here. It's babies and women. And we'll look at their two victim strategy here in a second. But to look at their basic approach in a bill is, instead of the abolitionist bill, which was total and immediate, they seek increments. They don't seek to abolish abortion, they seek to abolish kinds of abortions, and they allow exceptions. Even in the event that if they agree with abolitionists that abortion in the case of rape is still murder, they would allow it if it passed a bill. So if we want to go to the tree again, look at the tree, you've got the abolitionist with the axe, you've got the pro-life politician with the shears. A pro-life bill, and a pretty standard one that was very popular when I was drawing these pictures, is the dismemberment and abortion ban, but most of them follow this logic. So the dismemberment and abortion ban, which was passed in Oklahoma and has been upheld, it's still upheld. There's a little line in all the stories about it that says we're not really going to enforce it until the Supreme Court allows us to enforce it, but like, we've got this. But in Oklahoma and various other states, there is a ban on dismemberment abortion. Sounds good, right? Sounds like you're saving lives. So if you look at the language of, is that blinking for y'all or is it just blinking for me? Hey man, just roll with it, speaker, get on with it. So House Resolution 3515, the language, when you look at it, it's seeking to ban the abortion procedure known as a dismemberment abortion. And so you look at it and you get into the language, the abortion that it's banning any destroying of an unborn child, living unborn human being in the womb, through the use of clamps, grasping forceps, tongs, scissors, or similar instruments that, through the convergence of two rigid levers, slice, crush, or grasp. So it says what we're going to do is we're going to ban this process of using two levers to kill a baby. So obviously this is surgical abortion. This takes us to that side of the tree. And it takes us to a specific thing by highlighting forceps, right? So there's different kinds of abortion. If you guys can focus in on that blink. There's curettage, suction abortions, combinations of those things, forceps, combinations, so on and so forth. The ban wants to be on forceps abortion. So not to draw it, completely blatantly for all. This is for all the children in the. Oh, come on, thing. Just imagine that branch popping off and falling to the floor, right? So it goes to just the forceps, okay? So we're not dealing with any other kind of dismemberment abortion. You go, no, it's for dismemberment abortion. The law says no dismemberment. Actually, if you look at the law, and I don't know if it's probably too small for you guys to read, but if you look at B in the dismemberment abortion ban, it says literally in the law, it does not include an abortion which uses suction to dismember the body of the unborn child by sucking fetal parts into a collection container unless the action is described in subparagraph A, the forceps are used to cause the death. So the abortion dismemberment ban literally has written into the law, you are allowed to dismember babies, just not with too rigid levers. Okay? Very important thing, and there's a reason they put this in there is because abortion needs to remain legal, but maybe the Supreme Court will allow us to regulate what kind of instruments. So you can still kill them with suction, still kill them with curettes, and you, of course, can still kill them with RU-486, which now we're looking at the tree. We may have cut off the forceps branch, but to draw the tree a little bit more accurate, more abortions are happening not by forceps than by forceps. If you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and this tree is inaccurate because what's really going on is 88 to 92% of all abortions happen in the first trimester, 6 to 8 weeks. These are chemical abortions, cured abortions. Only 7% of them happen 14 to 20 weeks. And 14 to 20 weeks, you don't have to use forceps. You just want to use forceps because it's the preferred method. So what is this branch theoretically accounting for? 2 to 7% of the abortions. You say, well, that's good. You can save lives. So the pro-life politician says, look, I saved lives. And he grabs that branch and says, look, what have you done, abolitionist? I've got this branch. We've saved 2% of abortions with our dismemberment ban. But while he's waving that around saying, look what we've done, of course, people are still getting abortions at the same rate. They're just using more suction, more curettage. And that gap grows back in. And you do need to understand that we're not saying we don't want to save any lives. We're just saying this is a faulty method. But I'm just describing the two different ways. I'll let you choose. So pro-life bill does that. You have to, and to get serious about it, pro-life bills have to allow some babies to be aborted if it'll save some other babies. Right? So some babies are going to be aborted. We're going to allow babies to be aborted by suction devices if it'll save them by forceps. Another way this compromise works out, we're just getting the best that we can get, we're just doing the most good, is you have to practice child sacrifice in the fight against child sacrifice. Right? You understand the logic there. You cannot fight child sacrifice without practicing it. That's literally what you do. You go to an abortion clinic, sometimes you talk to some people, the reason they're killing the preborn baby is because they can't feed the 4 children they have at home. They're killing this baby to help these babies. That's literally what pro-life legislation does. Okay? So it's iniquitous and bad, but it is child sacrifice. An abolitionist says, no compromise with abortion, don't practice child sacrifice to fight child sacrifice. Pro-lifers say, no, the important thing here is that we compromise. It's key. We've got to save babies. And if we're going to save babies, we have to allow some to be aborted in the process all along the way. Okay, so the other important thing about pro-life legislation that differs from abolitionist legislation, and you hear this in the pro-life movement. If you're on social media, you will hear all these statements from pro-life leaders, lobbyists, politicians, that the pro-life movement will never seek to criminalize the woman. That's the language they always use, criminalize the woman. That's because that's the language the world uses. They think you're going to punish women, you're going to criminalize women. Now, of course, from an abolitionist perspective, we would say punish the mother, the father, anyone involved in destroying that human being ought to be treated like a murderer. But pro-lifers, and in their bills, they write specifically, especially since the rise of abolitionist in the past few years in abolitionist legislation, they will write into their bill, this will not punish the woman, the mother. So pro-life bills are trying to save women from abortion and also save women from abolitionists who want to extend the laws against murder equally to all people. So pro-life bills also, instead of dealing with babies, also tend to be written as make a better choice laws. So pro-life laws come across, and we know we live in a culture where women are finding out that they're pregnant, and pro-lifers say we want to reduce abortion numbers, we want to help these women not make this horrible decision. So let's write a law saying that if you're underage, you got to have parental consent. It's a pro-life bill, standard. Let's write a law saying that if you're going to get an abortion, you have to premeditate it for 72 hours. That's a pro-life bill. Let's write a law that you have to look at an ultrasound before you have an abortion. Educational laws. You have to know that there's this website that, like in Oklahoma, the abortionist works with the state to make sure that on his website there's a website that you can go to that's run by the state where you can look at cute babies and maybe make a better choice. And then there's also like informational laws that are educational. You have to inform them that they can reverse their decision halfway through the process. That's a popular pro-life one. But these laws are designed to try to encourage women to make a better choice. That sounds good. It sounds like it's to reduce abortion numbers, but that's what the pro-lifers are doing, and they're doing that because they don't believe you can abolish abortion, and until it's overturned by the Supreme Court, let's try to reduce the numbers as best we can. So again, compromise is key. We're trying to help people. All right, so y'all still with me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So we're trying to reduce abortion numbers, which means regulate abortion, not abolish abortion. And of course it means regulate the abortion industry. Bills that focus on ages, stages, methods, ages being sort of like 20-week abortion ban, stages, heartbeat bill, methods, forceps, the reason given for abortion. You can't abort a baby if it's to kill them because they have Down syndrome. But you can kill them because you don't want them. So if you have a Down syndrome baby, take them, get the abortion, just say, oh, it's not because they have Downs, it's because I don't want them. Easy peasy. But these are pro-life bills, and so that's what they try to regulate. And they also try to regulate the abortion industry, who can perform them, what kind of licenses they have to have, where they have to be performed, how they're performed, what must be done before they're performed, and all this kind of thing. So pro-life bills do that, and then you also have pro-life bills that don't even deal with abortion in and of itself, but deal with how abortion is funded. I'd say we defund everything, but yeah, defund abortion bills. Very popular among pro-lifers. Now all of this is consistent with punishing abortionists who violate regulations. You'll notice an abortionist just recently, there's like 2,000 babies in his house, right? And all the pro-lifers are up in arms because they got what are the regulations for taking bodies home? You know what I'm saying? Like, the guy murders babies for a living. All the abolitionists on Facebook are like, hello, he's murdering children. That's what you should be mad at. But we've got all these lobbyists and legislators in the pro-life movement saying, we need to get to the bottom of this and make sure that they're not taking the bodies home. So they'll punish the abortionists for doing that sort of things, and they'll try to shut down abortion clinics for failing to follow all these regulations. Meanwhile, because Satan is a wily lion, meanwhile, certain things are happening in our culture, like do-it-yourself abortion kits, abortions that you can order. And the young lady in this drawing is a millennial, and of course, like all good millennials, she's thinking, I wonder if there's any way I can get this online. And there is. And a do-it-yourself abortion clinic abortion pill that's ordered online, of course, can't be regulated by any of this stuff. Or you could pass another pro-life bill regulating what you can or cannot sell online, which is impossible, sorry to say. This is going to make our job very difficult. So at the same time that the young woman is thinking, how do I get this abortion? All this stuff doesn't matter. If you passed every single bit of it, it wouldn't matter. And also she's being told constantly by pro-lifers that she's not a murderer and that she shouldn't be criminalized for it. Now, why all of this stuff? Why not just say abortion's murder, it should be abolished? Why not? Well, because they are trying to write bills that comply and work within the parameters of Roe v. Wade, Casey v. Planned Parenthood, other Supreme Court decisions. All of this stuff is trying to comply with that essential holding. We're not going to keep you from abolishing abortion. We're going to keep you from abolishing abortion, but we could allow you to regulate it at some point in time. So the things like cutting down branches, which they'll pass like a dismemberment ban, and everyone's like, woohoo, this is awesome, and then it gets lots of likes on Facebook, but then a judge just throws it out. Yeah. They never even, because the Supreme Court says, you can't do that. You put an undue burden on the woman, she can't get an abortion. So the branches have to actually be, well, all analogies break down, folks. I'm sorry. You have to put the branch back on the tree somehow. I don't know. But anyway, so you understand that they do some things to challenge the Constitution, or challenge the Supreme Court ruling, but they don't even challenge it full on. They usually go for that increment, right? Okay, so as pro-lifers writing these bills, you say, why don't you just try to abolish abortion outright? They say, well, unfortunately, we have to work within the parameters of the Supreme Court's rulings, and the right to abortion is unfortunately a constitutional right. So the Supreme Court is our ruler, and pro-lifers generally agree that Roe is unjust, but the courts have ruled. Like, you will literally hear that. And you'll also hear from pro-life leaders, abolition is unconstitutional. Abolishing abortion as murder is unconstitutional, and you'll hear it from the top. You'll hear it from the leading pro-life apologists who say, listen, the reason that I can't support abolition bills is because they're unconstitutional, and the courts have already ruled from on high that we are not allowed to do this. So the pro-lifer who passes incremental legislation is not compromising, he's just doing the most good. Don't have that. That's a quote from Scott Klusendorf, and that is on a panel where he's specifically being asked, what about abolitionist legislation in code? Of course, Abby Johnson, very famous pro-life leader, when the Texas Abolition Act was being put forth and in the news and being talked about, Abby was asked by people online whether she supported the Texas bill. She said, I do not support this bill because it is unconstitutional. The bill says abortion should be abolished as murder in the state of Texas. I don't support it because that's unconstitutional, because abortion is constitutional. This is unplanned. This is Abby Johnson. Abortion is constitutional. We've made great strides in Texas by passing constitutional legislation that works within it, and I also do not support legislation that punishes women. So I'm not lying about this legislation. It may sound like I'm being harsh on them, but I'm describing them accurately. Now, as for nullification, pro-life bill, nullification. As for state sovereignty, what do y'all think? No. Nullification is bad. Pro-lifers in Oklahoma who killed Senate Bill 13 literally killed it because it had nullification in it. The president pro tempore of the Oklahoma Senate, who was behind killing the Abolition of Abortion in Oklahoma Act, came into the committee and said, I'm opposed to this bill because it is a nullification bill and nullification is unconstitutional. You're like, that's the 10th Amendment, bro. But anyway, this is who we elect, democracy. We get people who reflect where we're at, so I mean, it's our fault. But nullification, no. State sovereignty, no. The whole pro-life thing is how do we comply with the courts until Roe is repealed, right? So they'll fight a bill of abolition, they'll go for pro-life bills, and their justification is that we're not leaving that alone. We want you to do something about the Supreme Court. We want you to do that. But until the Supreme Court decides to repeal Roe, we must submit. We must comply. We cannot nullify. So this is a drawing we use a lot. And you've got right there, you've got the right and you've got the left. They're divided, but they're both bowing down to the same God. Yeah. Right? The right, just a little more charismatic. I don't know. That's a golden calf, badly drawn in there in between the pillars. But they're both saying what we need to do to protect these babies is what? What do they always say? To protect these babies, what we need to do is we need to vote for pro-life presidents. That's what we need to do. That's what they say for the past 45 years. What we really need to do is vote for pro-life presidents. Can a pro-life president abolish abortion? No, he can't. But guess what he can do? He can appoint Supreme Court justices. Right? So what does that say? The pro-lifer says, if we can only get 9 unelected appointed judges in the Supreme Court to turn this thing over, then we'll protect those babies. That's what they're saying. So the pro-life movement also wants you to support their bills and vote for pro-life politicians, even though pro-life politicians, by their own bills, cannot abolish abortion. They also want you to give to pro-life organizations. Now, all of this stuff, I think they've passed 240 pro-life laws across the states. All of this stuff, all of these organizations, all of this stuff that they're doing while complying to the court, which can say, "Nah, you're not allowed to do that." And they go, "Oh, we did our best," and they just send out more fundraising letters. All of it is done to delay abolition. And you may have been following me this whole time thinking, "No, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you," but this is kind of conspiracy nut stuff. Do you think these people are doing this just to protect their jobs? Yes. Well, y'all are a good crowd, but most of the time, people say, "No, they're not just doing this for the money. There's not money in this." Man, you guys are too educated for me. As a legislative lobbyist fighting abortion, there is no money in this if you're an abolitionist. But there is a lot of money in it, and there is a lot of votes. In Oklahoma, you're running against the guy, and the guy's pro-abortion, you're going to win, right? So you need abortion to remain legal so you can say that you're fighting it so people will vote for you instead of the other guy, right? So it's how you get your votes. It's how you get money for your organizations. And since CPCs, crisis pregnancy centers, are 5-to-1 for abortion clinics in the country, you've got to fund all those clinics, and those clinics become less, I think they would be necessary if we abolished it, but less necessary in the event that we abolish it. So all of this stuff, but let's say not being conspiratorial. What's really going on here is that all these legislators, all these governors, all of the people that we talk to, their thing, why they delay abolition, is they're all compliant. None of them are willing to interpose. The governors think, "I can't do this. If I stand up and lead my state to abolish abortion, the federal government might cut my money for roads. So I just comply," you know? So at root, even if they're not being greedy, even if there are good motives, they say, "Listen, I can't abolish abortion. I can't go down the abolition bill thing with you because I must comply." Well, you're an American. Read the birth certificate. When your government destroys the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, what are you supposed to do? Alter or abolish it. Now, someone says, "Well, you sound crazy, like you want to do secession, and you're for an organization called Free the States. Are you trying to cause another civil war?" And I usually go, "No. But if we ever fought one, that would be about the best reason for one." But we don't have to, right? With state sovereignty, with nullification, with bills of abolition, all we really need is governors, legislatures who will be consistent advocates who say, "We're going to abolish abortion, and you can cut our funding. As for us in our state, we are going to honor God. We're going to honor the other human beings in our culture. We're going to protect them." All right, so that's a pro-life bill, demarcated from an abolition bill. Here's the problem. If I were to actually give you something that was signed, all the support, all the money, all the politicians are into the pro-life thing. The abolition thing is a very small minority position. And we're doing good things. I think there are good things happening across the country. You've got an abolition bill here. You've got abolition bills in the sister state in Washington, of all places. Good work there. You've got abolition bills in Texas and Oklahoma. You've got abolition bills in Alaska, Indiana, and some other places. I just didn't make their logos. But we are beginning to put forward these bills that are outright nullification, total and immediate abolition of abortion as murder bills. And as soon as the number of abolitionists in government are among the people outnumber the number of pro-lifers, and I don't mean that in sort of like a tribal, use this word and not use that word. I mean that in these are two different kind of ideologies. These are two different kinds of bills. The moment that we have more people calling for total and immediate abolition, willing to interpose, than pro-lifers, this thing is over. In states like Oklahoma, we have a pro-life governor, pro-life lieutenant governor, we have a pro-life dominated Senate, a pro-life dominated House. I haven't checked everyone, but every sheriff that I've looked at is a pro-lifer. The only people keeping abortion legal in the state of Oklahoma is the pro-life government. And you tell me that there's no difference between pro-lifers and abolitionists. There is. In Oklahoma, it's 5,000 babies a year being murdered, and elsewhere to greater extents. So, pro-life or abolition, Demarcating the differences. I didn't tell you which one I prefer. But it's abolition, which is what all you folks are. So, thank you.